We are here. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Grateful that you're here. You guys did a podcast for us a while ago. That is a great resource. And you guys have ventured out on a topic that, man, I don't know, that takes a lot, that vulnerability and courage to be able to jump into this topic. So we'll let you run with it.
Thank you. We're happy to do it. Welcome to Confessions of a Ranching Couple. This is what your spouse wishes you knew, but won't say.
And we're Joshua and Tara Dukart, Seek First Ranch. We're located in North Dakota. But what we really want to start with is honestly our first confession. And that is we never intended on being a ranching couple.
Ever. We never intended to be a ranching couple. In fact, when we started dating and as our relationship got serious, it was one of those deal breaker moments. I said, I will never move to your family ranch. I was working as a middle school teacher at the time. And I perceived, speaking of paradigms that we've been talking about the last day and a half, my paradigm was that the ranching lifestyle would feel very, very isolating. And I also perceived that we would, if we, picturing as a married couple, that if we moved to the ranch, I would feel isolated from the standpoint of our location. We have long, cold winters here, but also the fact that I didn't grow up on a farm or a ranch. And I perceived that he would know about the ranch and I'd be doing my own thing, and we would kind of inevitably be living these two separate parallel lives. And that was not something that I wanted. Now, I want to be really careful before we go any further to just mention that when we talk about our own stories, we're willing to be very transparent in what this looks like for us. But we also respect that just because it doesn't work for us, it doesn't mean that we're not saying that it doesn't potentially work for other people. It might even work well for other people. But for me, that paradigm of the ranch lifestyle feeling very isolating was not something that I wanted as a part of our married life as a couple. So it was a hard no for me when we were dating, all the way up until we got married and beyond.
And not only was the piece of this of here, it's either the ranch or it's this woman. This is the ranch that I grew up on, and I had a pretty opportunistic childhood. I mean, I loved the outdoors. I could hunt, I could fish. I was horseback a lot of the time. I really loved what I had the opportunity to do, but it never occurred to me that it would be a possible career or livelihood. Both my parents worked off the ranch by Western North Dakota stereotypical standards. This ranch was really, really small, maybe even hobby farm if you want to go to that extent. The land was important to my family, but there just wasn't much of it. And so I didn't ever see this as an opportunity to farm and ranch full time. And of course, it was just a deal breaker then when I met Tara, and we decided like together that this was not going to be an option moving forward. And to further solidify that, as I grew up, and maybe some of you can attest to this, but farming and ranching, the production side of that was not only was it not encouraged, but it actually was discouraged, not by my parents, but by community members, by other farmers and ranchers in the area. And I knew I was interested in agriculture, so I still went and got a degree and got a job, in agriculture, in soil conservation. I was an engineer for a while, but it was only in a support role because there was so much adamant opinion: do not go back to the farm or the ranch. So between that and her potential feelings of isolation, it was totally off the map.
Right. So now we still joke and we laugh about the fact that we are a ranching couple. And so the next question is, how did we get here?
And to be honest with you, we got to a place where we were, and this actually goes back to something that Tony said yesterday that we can really identify with. And with some things that happened to us personally from a health standpoint, with a child who was born with a potential fatal condition, with the bills that piled up from a medical standpoint, and me taking every job, every gig, everything I could do, and therefore being gone probably more than I was at home, we got to the point where we were broken. I mean, we were drowning, we were broken, and not until you get to that particular point did we finally start trying to see things through a different lens. And I will admit, holistic management and some of those things that we had at our disposal helped us look through things with a different lens. But being broken, we were able to actually reset our situation and start asking far different questions.
That's right. So during this time, as we were reaching this breaking point, that is when we were introduced to holistic management. And it was something that Joshua started exploring, and he had tremendous mentors that helped model that for him in asking questions differently, in seeing different things, and in questioning our paradigms, which essentially then in that state of our desperation, and I do call this the chapter of our lives, the ocean of tears, and it felt like we were drowning. One day, Joshua came in with his bulleted point list. He had already been formulating in his mind how he saw that the ranch could be a place for our quality of life. He saw that the ranch could be a place for us to steward the land and fill that biological component of holistic management. He also saw and believed that we could make this profitable. And I beat him to the punch. And when he came home with his bulleted point list, I said, honey, I think that we should move to the ranch. Now, another confession I want to point out to you right now, in our relationship, I am the visionary. I can see things and I can visualize the future. So I'm the visionary in our relationship, and Joshua is the one who keeps us grounded. And maybe you can identify that in your relationship. Maybe you have a visionary in your relationship. And I want to also say, what we speak about here, it definitely is going to speak to the couples and couples in ranching, but a lot of this is simply relationship based. And so whether you're a couple or not, whether you're in the agricultural industry or not, a lot of these things should be able to apply to you, your family, and or your team. So when Joshua was able to, so back to what I was saying with it. So you might identify in your relationship, you might have a visionary and you might have somebody else who keeps you grounded. And this talk is meant to be interactive. So as you are listening with us, we would like to invite you to mention some things in the chat. So right now, if you would be willing, if you just put in the chat, who are you in the relationship? Are you a visionary? Are you the numbers person? Are you the stable person who kind of questions things? Do you like bullet points? What do you know about the key pieces of your personality? You can put those in the chat because I'm always curious to see.
And this is primary. There are times where those roles are reversed. It depends on the topic. It depends on the situation. But oftentimes we've needed to recognize who's operating in what role in order to have a productive and effective conversation.
Right.
If we're both trying to be visionary, but we're going in different directions, then we need to ask some additional questions to try and sort that out. As you are filling the chat box with those particular items, if you choose to, one of the things that I wanted to point out was that when we decided that we wanted to do this, we knew that there were some fears that we had and there were some unknowns. And so we wanted to be very intentional about not only further developing, but refining our holistic context, because that helped us determine direction. But we wanted to make sure that direction was as solid as we could be. We had lots of succession discussions because my parents are still on this operation. And of course, we have 3 kids. They are the 5th generation of this whole deal. And operating a triple generation operation without intentionality or without focus, honestly, I think could really be a challenge. And we've butted up against some of those challenges. So the name of our ranch, and I'll let Tara explain this, but Seek First Ranch was a very intentional piece of our puzzle in order to provide a foundation and in order to provide kind of that pinpoint, like Roger brought up his analogy of a spear. We wanted to have that kind of precision in what we were after.
Absolutely. So in those discussions that we were having about our holistic context, like Joshua said, the 3rd generation is still living here. And we wanted to very much honor that in the 2nd generation and the 1st generation. In addition to that, for us, we wanted to have a name that really represented who we were as a couple, who we wanted to be as a family, how we wanted to shift and adjust our mindset as we continued to grow and build this business. And by the way, our business now composes of the ranch side of things and then the education speaking side of things. So before we go on to the meaning behind our name, let's just, if you go back and just, Joshua will speak to the ranch side of the business.
The ranch side of the business has evolved over time. It was traditionally just a cow-calf operation and sold calves every year, and that's about the extent that it was. We have expanded that into multiple enterprises. There's still cow-calf, there's stockers. We grass finish a number of head each year. We direct market those. That's a piece that we added as we spent more time here, and we fill in the gaps with custom grazing when that's appropriate. But as we have evolved this, we realize that there's not this set in stone combination of enterprises that have to be in place. It's the ones that we see value, and we believe that we can not only capture the best value from, but we can also serve others through as well.
So in addition to that value, we've had people, mentors, pour into us and add value into our lives. And so a part of our business model is to be intentional with how we intend to add value to other people's lives. And one of the ways we do that is through our education business. So we are allowed to do opportunities to speak like this on webinars, live and pre-recorded. We also have opportunities to get to be in front of people in the room and do activities with them that are interactive and teach schools, etc. So back to the name. So we settled on Seek First Ranch. And for us, as part of our holistic context, what this means for us is, first and foremost, we named it after Matthew 6:33 and the Bible verse of seek first the kingdom, and all these things should be added unto you. So it really speaks to our heart and mind, being intentional about seeking God's will for us first, because we tried to do it our own way. And that was part of where our brokenness came from. We were really trying to make things happen in our own timeline, in the time frame and the way that we wanted. And when we were able to surrender that to God's will and hone in on that, that's where the Seek First Bible verse really, really spoke to us. And then the second reason is because we believe in the power of asking really great questions. And we say oftentimes it's not about the answer, or we won't ever get the answers that we're really, really looking for, the root of the problem or the heart of the matter, if we're not asking the right questions. So if you relate to that at all, put it in the chat. What do you think about questions? Go ahead and even if we don't have time to get to your chat comments live during this presentation, we're really excited to be able to go back to the recording and hear what some of you have to say, because we want you to be an integral part of this conversation. All right. So,
and the last thing that I want to add is because we've had mentors lead us and offer opportunities to us, that's what led us to holistic management and eventually becoming certified, both of us through Holistic Management International, also through organizations like the John Maxwell Leadership Group. And oftentimes it's simply just being a part of groups like this and being connected into circles where you are supported, but you're also challenged. And I think both of those pieces are really important.
That's right. All right. So now we want to get into confessions of a ranching couple, what your spouse wishes you knew but won't say. I want to speak to the three things. And if you want to jot this down, you're welcome to do that. But the three things that we find are universal relationship desires. Number one, people are wanting safety or security. They want to be able to have that deep, deep rooted level of trust. Number two, a sense of belonging. And number three, the desire to be heard, and not just heard, but understood. So those are the three universal relationship desires that we have honed in on, that's made a big difference in our lives, is understanding that relationship desires are security, safety. Number 2, a sense of belonging. And the third desire is to be heard and understood. So I'm going to tell you a little story. And after the story, we are going to invite you to put in the chat which one of those 3 things you think is causing the conflict in this story. All right, here it is. Back when we were first married, we actually had time to sit down and enjoy a sitcom together. And so one of the sitcoms we used to watch it's off air now, but I'm going to tell you a little bit of this interaction between a married couple. And maybe you know the show I'm talking about, maybe you don't, but their names are Phil and Claire. And to set the scene, they're in the kitchen and Claire is mixing something. She's preparing some kind of food. And Phil comes home from work and he starts telling her about his day. And in doing so, she absolutely loses it. And she starts throwing things and yelling. And Phil is standing there thinking that this is completely out of nowhere and completely irrational. And he has no idea what he said that has been so over the top offensive to his wife. And the rest of the episode, it kind of peels back what happens. So what started this huge blow up in their marital kitchen was Phil says, oh, I had a work lunch and I was out to eat with Bob. And you know what, honey? Bob recommended the wedge salad. And it was so good, you should really try it. This is the point where she loses it. So I want you to identify, I'm going to tell a little bit more about why she loses it. And then I want you to put in the chat, do you think this is because Claire was feeling a lack of safety? Do you think Claire was feeling a lack of belonging in her marriage? Or do you think Claire was missing the sense of being understood and heard? All right, so here's why she loses it. They have been to this restaurant multiple times together, just the 2 of them on the date. And more than once, Claire has ordered the salad and she has enjoyed the salad. The wedge salad, specifically the wedge salad. Claire has enjoyed this salad and she has even said to her husband, Phil, this salad is so good, you should really try the wedge salad. All right, so tell me right now, which one of those 3 relationship desires was broken in this moment? Definitely. I'm seeing in the chat, you guys are getting
onto it.
Yep.
You're onto it.
Claire was, she blew up. I'm sure that it seems maybe like an overreaction in the moment. But if you can relate to this, I know we've had some of these things. Sometimes a conversation between your spouse or anybody else that you're in a relationship with is simply the straw that breaks the camel's back. And in this case, Claire has already been voicing this recommendation. And not only did Phil present it like it was brand new information, it also offended Claire, and I think understandably, because he was valuing the opinion of somebody over his wife's. And so it created this whole big fight. So oftentimes what we realize is that it's never about the wedge salad, right? You could be having an argument with your spouse after a day of working cows. Or you could have an argument about some project in the house that has been on the list for months and isn't getting done. And the root of it is usually not that one item. It's not about the cows, it's about something else. And so these 3 desires that we just talked about, of course, there are more than just these 3. A lot of them can fit into that category. But what we invite you to do if you're in a heated moment, we invite everyone to pause and each take some time. We don't sweep things under the rug, but take some time to understand, okay, what is this really about? And not always, but oftentimes it will be one of those three things or a variation of one of those three things.
So real quickly, I'll give you a different example. Because we're a multi-generational operation here, my parents are still a very active participant, although they have relinquished most decision making and risk and management. They want to participate, so they're still very active. And when it comes to certain things over the years, I have been that younger generation going to my father and saying, here, this is something I think we should try. Here's something I think is interesting. I think we could do this. And what I learned is that if I presented the idea, he wasn't necessarily opposed, but he wasn't going to own it. And so oftentimes I would go to events, something like this, or in-person events, conferences, I would take him with, I would invite him with. He would hear the exact same thing from someone else, but maybe more of his generation, someone that he considered a peer. And on the way home, he would bring this idea up to me as I'm driving, as if it's a brand new idea. Josh, have you ever heard about this? I think we should try this. And what I needed to decide for myself is what was more important: who gets credit for the idea, or the fact that now we're on the same page and we're excited to move forward with this new idea. And so Tara and I, comically, our term is wedge salad. And I think there's times where we've even said that out loud, intentionally or unintentionally, when situations like that come up. And of course, nobody else in our space necessarily gets it, but it gives us just a little humorous chuckle about, hey, this is more about the result that we're going to get than it is about who gets credit for the process.
That's right. It's kind of an inside joke between the two of us. Well, it sounds like a wedge salad situation to me. So I actually posed this question on our Facebook page. So we at Seek First Ranch, we have a Facebook page. You're welcome to join that if you would like to. But I asked some of our followers, what were some things that you wish your spouse knew and that they weren't hearing? And I want to say that although we are willing to be transparent, we also hold very dear to us confidentiality. So I'm not going to share those stories that people shared with us because they were told in confidence, but it was just interesting to see the things that people were willing to admit in that private setting that either they're struggling with now or that they're looking back on a relationship that ended. Some in particular ended in divorce, because they weren't able to get to the root of the matter and truly hear each other and have those relationship needs met.
So within these three fairly universal relationship desires that people have, we found that most of these confessions from those on social media fell into one or more of those three categories. So what we'd like to share next is from a personal and from a professional standpoint, what things came out of that, not only for us, but also then how we try to serve others in the capacity of facilitation and teaching and speaking, to create the conversations that need to happen.
Right. So a personal example for us from a safety or security standpoint, you want to tell about this one?
I can. Early on in our ranching career here, we just hit the ground running. And I honestly reverted back to most of the things that I just knew as a kid because it was easy. I just kind of dove right in. And what I forgot in the process was that I was bringing a woman into this operation that not only did not grow up on a ranching operation, which, to be honest with you, is one of the greatest gifts that she gives to our ranch, is the fact that she asks questions that don't come from a ranching background or perspective. But what happened early on is that she would ask questions and I would honestly take some offense to them. And in that space, I was not providing the safety and security because she was not asking because she was questioning my ability. She was asking because she was curious and she wanted to know, she wanted to be supportive and or wanted to see any red flags that might have been there. So one of the things that we have worked really, really hard to establish is that even in the heated moments, even when the cattle or the sheep or whatever is not going well, we work really, really hard to create the space that people, whether it's a spouse, a child, somebody of the older generation, the neighbor, an employee, whatever it is, that they can ask questions and that we will honor those particular questions. So creating this risk-free environment is something that we create as much as we possibly and humanly can on our operation, whether it's in our house here, whether it's out in the corrals, out in the pasture, in the truck, whatever it might be, creating a risk-free environment, because oftentimes I'm expecting people to learn and or know stuff up front, and oftentimes that's unfair. But if we create the environment to where they're willing to ask, then we can handle this and we can all grow because of it.
And if I can be honest, when we first moved here, I felt very insecure. And I don't think that I could have related it to that security piece, but I think that's what the root of it was, because I felt like a fish out of water. I wanted to help. I wanted to engage. I literally did not know what to do. I didn't know. This was so foreign to me. And so I think I felt very insecure in my knowledge. And that was definitely a challenge that we needed to overcome. And we'll talk more about how this concept of leadership piece, we'll continue to talk about that more toward the end, how that really bridged that gap, so that I wasn't feeling so insecure or, right. So then to transfer this again, because our goal in our business at Seek First Ranch is to practice these things, be real and honest, and be willing to be vulnerable about it. But it's also to create space for people to come forward and talk about their own insecurities with a solution and resolution seeking mindset. So we in our schools, as some of you might know, Joshua and I teach a 3-day Regenerate school or retreat, and we have worked with a lot of intention to design those specifically for people to have that level of safety and security so that they can come forward and talk about the things from the biological side of their operation, from the financial side of their operation. Like John talked about yesterday, it's hard to talk about those things sometimes. And then from the social piece. And because we are a couple, and because I'm a woman, as you know here, we have fabulous speakers on. I'm the only woman here. I absolutely love working with other couples and other women and helping them feel safe and secure to be able to share. Like, okay, you could have the perfect grazing plan. You could even be profitable, but if your marriage is falling apart, we need to look at that and deal with that. So it's why we're very, very intentional with how we design the feel of our schools so that people really feel safe and we have a level of trust. We are honest and we want people to we're honest and we want people to be able to trust us, because I think that's a really important value to us.
It's really how we find that people, including ourselves, break down barriers, break through paradigms, and you start to see things differently because we've had that opportunity. We're continuing to try and look for those opportunities, how we might see things differently, but also to be able to serve people in that same capacity. I'd like to move on to the second one, this sense of belonging. One of the things that we have, and it was kind of a blind spot for me, but with 3 generations on this particular operation, it's not only Tara and I figuring out how to work together and how even to include our kids, which are our daughter's 12, and then we have 2 boys that are 11 and 5. But we have my parents as well. And the idea that they were just going to retire, be done, be gone, and have no part in this was never what the conversation alluded to. And so we are finding ways, we're working hard to find ways for them to be included, for them to be valued, and their roles have shifted, no doubt. But as Jim Garrish talked about yesterday, they did things a certain way when they were in control and were the main decision makers for their operation. And now we are doing some many, many things. And we made some pretty sweeping changes when we moved here in 2016, and we're continuing to do that. And for my parents, in some ways, it's been exciting, probably more so for my father, because he's been coming to events and he's been a part of so many of these types of discussions. But for my mother, who actually grew up on this place as a child and has tremendous respect for her parents and all that they sacrificed, we did not realize that all the sweeping changes that we were making, she silently took offense to, in terms of that must mean that what they did was wrong. And Jim alluded to this yesterday, that it wasn't necessarily wrong. It was implemented. Those practices and management techniques were implemented based on what they knew, based on the circumstances, which now have changed significantly. And we had to find a way to not only break into that conversation, which we have, and I think we're in a good place now, but we had to find a way to honor and respect the past, but not be restricted by the past. And that piece was kind of treacherous ground for a little while, because I just hit the ground and we started sprinting. And what we didn't do is include or be inclusive of everybody that needed to be at the table in order to participate in that conversation. I think we've always been pretty good about asking people what they want, but we didn't always ask the question of, what do you value about what's already happened? Because there are absolutely some traditions that we are continuing. Our main focus is, how do we build a business? How do we run a business? How do we make it profitable? And how do we regenerate the land, our financial situation, and our relationships? So all three of those harmonious pieces. But there are part of every one of us, we have parts in our past that are important to us. And I'm sure at some point we will have those same things. So honoring and respecting the past, but not being restricted by it is a balance that we've continued to navigate.
Right. And in some of the activities we do where we facilitate, we really want to make sure that everyone who should be at the table has been invited to be at the table. And maybe you can relate to that. If there's some big decisions that you need to make, making sure that everyone is invited to be a part of the conversation, who plays a key role in making sure that whatever decision you make goes forward according to your family or your team's values and goals.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And so the third one then, out of these 3 points, the third one, to be heard and understood. And this actually goes back to a Covey concept that of the 7 habits, if you've read or listened to that particular book, that is not so much listen to respond as listen to understand. And so it's not just hearing things. I think all of us oftentimes can hear things, but do we actually understand? Are we willing to have our intentionality of our listening be in such a way that we actually not only hear, but understand what they have to say? And one of the confessions that I'm going to share here is maybe a little bit raw for me, because in some circles it may deem as, well, you should just handle this and just take care of it. But I think for many of us, maybe not all of us, but for many of us, we carry burdens, right? And with those burdens, oftentimes there are moments when we want to share those. And it's not from a woe is me. And as John Haskell put it yesterday, we're not looking to enable a victim mentality in any way.
Right.
But we do work to enable the opportunity to validate what someone is thinking or feeling. But then we shift very quickly to a solution-seeking type mindset. But oftentimes, to open the door to that conversation is the validation of what someone is dealing with and what they're thinking or what they're feeling. And on the other side of that, on the other end of the spectrum, there's accomplishments that we have. I remember seeing the pictures yesterday, Tony, that you showed of that creek and the before and the after. And oftentimes we see this a lot in holistic management, regenerative agriculture. We see these before pictures, we see these after pictures, then we hear the story. And in there, that was a win. That was something that was accomplished. It took intentional actions in order to make that happen. And if you accomplish something like that, or your family or team accomplishes something like that, and there is no celebration of it, and I'm not saying you got to throw a party, but there's no acknowledgement of that win, of that accomplishment, oftentimes we don't have as much motivation or inspiration to move forward with the same urgency or energy that we did. And so one of the things that I'd like to think of is when our kids were young, and probably when Tara and I were young as well, and if you have kids, you probably can relate to this. But what happens when your very young child accomplishes something? What do? We cheer them on, right? We give them, praise for what they achieved, even if it was something very simple and small. Now, don't get me wrong. We also try and let them fall down, and we let them learn some things the hard way, and they will remember those as well. But when they have a win, we celebrate that win with them. And I think oftentimes for whatever reason, we grow out of that as adults, and we don't help share the burden when appropriate. We also don't celebrate the wins as often with others in our community and in our families as we maybe should. And so we've tried to take on that mentality to validate the feelings, share the burden when appropriate, and then also celebrate the wins that we get along the way.
And although I love a good party and I'm a huge fan of cake, I think even celebrating those wins with a thank you and appreciation, this is not new, but I think a really good reminder for myself, and maybe you need this reminder as well, simply saying thank you or showing appreciation or gratitude can go so far. I know, even like, I'm a mom and I'm in charge of meals most of the time, and it's all multiple times every day. And simply hearing someone from my family say, "Thank you for the meal, Mom. Thank you for making this." It really, really deepens our relationship because it helps me feel valued. And it's not who I am as a person. The meal isn't representative of me, but I see that what I am doing in the way that I'm loving my family through cooking this meal, it's being valued and received and appreciated. So I'm going to challenge myself, and we'll work on this week as a family, to really challenge ourselves to show that appreciation piece. Thank you for, it can be little things, taking out the garbage. Thank you for checking on the cattle, thinking, and it needs to come, of course, from a genuine place, but wouldn't our relationships all improve if we could celebrate things that people do by simply saying thank you?
And I'll add one more piece to that. In this, I think, is pretty common with agricultural folks, because we tend to be humble, we tend to deflect praise, we tend to just not accept it all the time. If someone says, "Hey, thank you," or "good job," I know I'm guilty of this, that I'm like, "Well, it wasn't that big a deal," or "Hey, I had a good team behind me," or "That's just all in a day's work," whatever that might be. One of the best things that I've learned, that when someone is willing to offer you a thank you, the best thing you can say, "You're welcome." Like, accept it, and don't steal the opportunity from that person who is willing to offer you a thank you and willing to offer you praise. Don't steal the offer. Don't steal the generosity that they have offered to you. Accept it, and accept it cheerfully.
I'm going to take that and with one other additional example. Now, you'll notice we opted to not do slides because we value communication, and part of this relationship building is based on communication. And if you know the statistics like we do, and Joshua's the numbers guy, so I'm going to call on you, the communication is broken up into the words we speak, the tone of our voice, and our body language. If you happen to know what those percentages are, if you've heard that statistic, you can throw those in the chat if you already know them. But Joshua can correct me if I don't remember this. The actual words we speak accounts for only 7% of our communication. The tone of our voice, the tone and how we say it, accounts for 38%. Mm-hmm. And then our body language is the majority. So this should equal up to be 100. What do I have left? 55%? Does that sound right? Mm-hmm. So the majority, over half, is our body language. And to take this gratitude piece, I like to follow inspirational people on social media. And so someone shared that when someone says, so this is body language, when someone gives us a compliment and we say, oh, no, it's, we diffuse it. What we are actually telling people with our body language is, you've just given me the gift of your words. Our words are a gift. And I think that if we start to think about our words as a gift, I think that would change the way that we think about our communication. So if our words are a gift and I take what somebody has given me as a compliment, which is a gift, and I use my body language to throw that gift away, it's really no different than somebody offering me a present that they've made by hand, or that they have seen in a store and thought about me and purchased it and they've given that to me. I would never take something physical and throw it back in their face. But in our desire, I think sometimes, and maybe those of us in the Midwest can relate to this more, in our desire to be humble, what we're doing with our body is we're taking that and we're throwing it away. So I have learned to shift into, thank you for that. Thank you. And accept that gift. So I hope that helps you like it's helped us.
And so with this whole, communication piece, and Bob earlier this morning talked about feel, right? And how important that is, whether you're on horseback or whether you're in and amongst the cattle. Well, that feel comes oftentimes not from the words that we use or the tone that we use. I believe it comes from that body language and how just immense that form of communication is. And so one of the things that we do in our multi-day school is we try and incorporate activities and games and things that are not necessarily specific to agriculture. They're fun, they're lighthearted, but they reveal some really powerful things. And one of those things, and I know there's some of you on here that have participated in this activity with us. It's a game that actually our kids came up with, or we observed that they were playing one day. And I'll be honest, we asked their permission, but we kind of stole it from them, and we use it in our schools. And now they have started to help us. Actually, our kids have helped us start to facilitate this. But what it does is it allows people to witness and to experience what it's like to not have body language as a part of our communication.
Right.
And there are all kinds of things that get revealed to people personally, some that they're willing to share with the group, and others I know that they will share with us privately. And one of those things then leads us into the last piece that we want to share here, and probably the most raw and vulnerable piece for me. But at one of our schools, I got into a conversation after this particular Lego activity, and the conversation formulated around the idea of holding people to a high standard. Now, this is something that I've always tried to do for myself, as I've held myself to a high standard, whether it's managing our land or our money or our marriage, or how I want my kids to behave, or how we want our culture on our ranch to be. And what the conversation was is that if we hold all these people to a really high standard, and it might be employees, it might be family members, might be neighbors, whatever it might be, and they don't achieve that, then we have tended to feel disappointed. And so what I really was getting wrong about this is I had this expectation, but I had this level of leadership to help them actually achieve it. Just because I have worked really hard to practice a high level of stockmanship, and don't get me wrong, I have got a long ways to go. But just because I have that expectation, just because my kids have maybe watched or my wife has watched, all of a sudden when things don't go well in the corral or in the pasture and people don't achieve that high level, that high standard that I have as the expectation, the standard was not the problem. Because what the other gentleman offered was, he's like, I just need to significantly lower my standards. And as we discussed that, the standard was not the problem. Now, does there need to be a level of realism to a standard? Yes, there probably needs to be. But the problem in this case, and in many cases, was not the standard. It's that there was not the leadership provided in order to help people achieve that standard. And it doesn't happen overnight, obviously. It takes time. But I had people that invested in me in order to achieve what I think is a higher and higher journey to a higher standard. But I need to be willing to invest that same journey. And that is not, Josh, micromanaging. That is not me being the dominant one, the one that talks the most, the one that's the loudest, any of those pieces. It's leadership is a far different piece that I think Tara can speak to as well.
That's right. One other example that I want to give that came out of this Lego activity that we did, and I'm going to be very discreet here because I know this person is engaged in this exact webinar live with us right now. But after we did that activity, because it's a group activity, and I won't give away too many of the details, but what came out of that was this person's own realization that the way that she was speaking to her partners with her tone and with her body language was significantly calmer and more respectful and friendlier than she admitted to speaking to her own spouse. And so it triggered an aha moment for her to be able to go home and rethink about the way that she speaks to her spouse and the people that we love. And I thought that was such a brilliant takeaway, to be honest, to recognize those things about our own behavior. And other people have mentioned similar and equally powerful observations about the way that they're communicating within their relationship. All right.
So really one of the things that I've come to the conclusion, and of course, this is just my opinion, but as our place has progressed since 2016, I will admit there have been some frustrations in terms of the progress or lack of progress, some of the obstacles that I thought wouldn't be obstacles. And we weren't naive to that this wasn't going to be a challenge. It's just simply that, hey, we should be further along. I have been blessed. Both of us have been blessed with these mentors that Tara talked about, and continue to have mentors in our lives. Some of them are on this webinar here today. There's some that are even speaking yesterday and today. And we just weren't making the progress that we needed. And the conclusion I came to is that for us, and maybe it is for you as well, but the missing piece to solve much of what ails us in our situations, I know it's pretty broad, but in our situations, the solution was not better management. The solution for us was first better leadership. Without that leadership providing the point on the spear, which is, what Roger had brought up, without that leadership guiding the way, without the leadership being willing to lead when you need to lead, follow when you need to follow, let others take up the torch when they need to, that was the part that we were missing. And maybe it'll be something different at some point else in the future, but we kept just trying to implement one more piece of management, more grazing management, more cover crops, more no-till, more or different genetics, and we'd make very small incremental advances. But we have come far greater distances in the last 6 months to a year because we have invested in the leadership component of what I was severely lacking, and in some case, what we were lacking together.
Definitely. So if you, this summit is so much about paradigms. So if you are holding a paradigm right now of leadership being something that is dominating or one-sided or micromanaging, that's not the definition that we give to leadership. When we talk about leadership, we really want to think about leadership from the standpoint of, as leaders, we intend to add value to other people, and we intend to receive value back from them. So this harmonious leadership is the kind of leadership that we are striving for. And like one of our mentors, John Maxwell, maybe you're familiar with John Maxwell, something that he says all the time, everyone deserves to be led well. And if I can confess one more thing to you, I know this about myself. I know that I have a very dominant personality. I have to be very cautious with it because it can be a little bit abrasive, right? So
Sure.
it's true. I will admit it. So even me with a dominant personality, I crave leadership. I crave it. And in my marriage, I crave it from my husband. And I think that's biblical. It talks about that in Ephesians. So I think everyone, to the root of it, they crave leadership, but not the domineering kind of leadership. Again, we're talking about the leadership that adds value to people. It adds value to their team. Everybody who is at the table, who wants that kind of really effective leadership, desires to be heard, understood, and safe, and feel like they belong. And that's all part of leadership for us. So we want to close with a couple of gifts for you, and then an opportunity for you to be more vocal in these kinds of conversations. So Margot, if you would do me a huge favor, I gave Margot a link to a resource. She's going to put that in the chat, and it is beautiful. So she's got that right there. If you want to click on that, and if you end up missing that and you're not seeing it, I know Margot has it in the chat right now, but you can always reach out to us and we can give you this resource too. But it looks like this, and I know you cannot read this, but this is what it's going to look like. So when you open it up, this is a tool that is free for you to use. It is from this book, and I can't wait to get deeper into this. This is John Maxwell's Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. And what we are loving about this book right now is that it absolutely speaks to us from the standpoint of leadership, and everyone deserves to be led well, and how we foster this kind of relationship that we need in our families and in our businesses. And Seek First Ranch, we're all about asking the right questions. So this book is chock full of all kinds of questions that leaders ask themselves, what they should be asking of others, and also what they believe people should be asking of them. So it's this full circle leadership that I think everyone's craving. So I am so excited to be doing a mastermind coming up in May, and we invite you to be a part of it. So here's what that's going to look like. You will get a whole guide. If I remember correctly, it's like a 50-page guide. So I will send this to you. Margot, if you would put our giveaway in the chat too, it's seekfirstranch.com. That's how you get a hold of us. seekfirstranch.com/leadership. So Margot has that in the chat right now at seekfirstranch.com/leadership. If you want to be a part of our ongoing, we'll have a mastermind session. We are offering this to you as a gift from us for participating in this summit. What we're going to do is we are going to talk about some of the questions in here, and then we're going to sit face to face, and you will have an opportunity to give your opinion. Like, we'll talk about the question, we'll break it down. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? How could this add value to your life? How could this add value to your team? All right. So let us know. We'll invite you back in, Jared, if there are questions. Again, if you go to seekfirstranch.com/leadership, you can join our upcoming mastermind session as a complimentary gift to you. We recommend that you would either check out this book from your local library, or you can buy it from your favorite bookstore online. Of course, you can get it new. I got this one, a used copy. So it's not a requirement to be part of it, but it'll definitely help heighten the experience, I think, for you to be able to read. That way, you could highlight, and I already have flagged some of the questions that we're going to be going over in our next session.
That is perfect.
But I just want to close with thank you, Jared and Selena, and your team for doing this. We are honored to be a part of it. Considering a number of the other speakers on this, I mean, it is an incredible lineup, and to be included in that this time around, because you've had them before, you will have many more in the future. I just think this is a really great format and forum that is just ripe with opportunities for us to learn as well. So it's been incredible. Thank you.
You bet. Well, thank you guys. Honestly, you have brought so much. And when Celine and I present again, we're going to try to tie in maybe a little bit of why these presenters were necessary. And really, this is very much a God-led thing because, you know, we just kind of put it out there of like, who do we need to have? And we're prayerful about it. And the right people were the ones that were available and committed. And so your message is just critical at this time, because really, if we're going to have a legacy business, we've got to get along. We've got to be vulnerable. We've got to be humble. And man, go ahead, please type in the chat what your takeaways are. We probably have time for maybe one quick question. If anybody has a question, they can either unmute or go ahead and type it in the chat. But for me, leadership, that's what I'm needing right now. Like, management does not solve the problems, these significant challenges. And boy, I've run from it for long enough. So it's time to step into that role of being a leader. And so thanks for calling me out on that, you guys. And it's uncomfortable and it's scary. It's like, it's easier just to go back to management. It's easier just to, yeah. Tara, what is your role with the ranch? Hands-on ? Jen asks.
Oh, yes, my role. I'll answer this as quickly as possible. We have this activity that we do in our schools, and it helps people identify their strengths and what they're really good at. Because like I said earlier in this webinar, I struggled a lot. And so it came down to, okay, what are my God-given strengths? I have a background in language arts and teaching writing. I love people, and I love talking about really good food. And a lot of the reason why we raise grass-fed beef is for our own health reasons. And when I have all this research about how our food is raised and how we are choosing to raise our food, it's not for everybody, but I love to have conversations with people who want what we have. And I think all of us in the markets that with our customers, we are all, as business owners, we have a product to serve our customers. In our case, one of those products is grass-fed beef. So I do the marketing, which is a natural fit for me. And yeah, so I'm in charge of the grass-fed beef and the marketing. And what else do I do? I guess
Well, the sheep management, that was an enterprise that,
Yeah.
that we added. And I'll be honest with you, when we added the sheep, one of my caveats was that this is not going to be just another job for Josh. And so it became a role, a leadership role in Tara's case, and a supportive labor role for our kids. And to that activity that Tara talked about, instead of, oftentimes we decide to who has to take that role, who has to fill that job, who's going to draw the short straw. We went to the other side of that spectrum, and we identified, what do we do well? What are our passions? What are our interests? Let's build the foundation of our team there, and then we'll figure out where the voids are, and maybe there needs to be other people that get brought in. And we've done that.
Oh yeah, this is you've been talking about this, the who, not how. The who's are huge. The who's are huge. Bring in the people that you need to help you facilitate better conversations, to do your books, like John talked about, if that's a missing link in your own business. Yeah, find your who's, definitely.
Our inability to grow and to improve wasn't limited by our desire to do more. It was limited by our time. We can only do so much. And therefore, we needed to find more who's to sit on that. You gave that diagram yesterday, Jared, where you've got all these things on one side, and it's not really balanced if there's just one person on the other side. Yeah. We had to add other people to that, and that was a very difficult piece for me to be open to. But I tell you what, now that we've opened the doors to that, now we're looking more and more for the right who's, the right people to add to that side, because the more people we add there, the more support we have, and the more things we can do and serve on the other side of that teeter-totter.
Yeah. So I do want to leave you with this. I wish more than anything, we had 2 hours right now to have face-to-face conversation with everybody. That's exactly why we are doing this next mastermind session that you can sign up for free, because I promise it will be very interactive and you can ask questions, and you are welcome to share according to your own comfort level during that next session. And we are willing to be honest and transparent, and it's not about us. It's really about you and what you need, and where you have gaps, and getting to the root of your issues. And if we can add value to you in that space, we are absolutely honored and blessed to be able to do that.
Very good. Well, very good, you guys. Thank you so much. I went ahead and registered. I clicked on that link because I want to sit down for 2 hours. This is perfect for what we need and where we're at in our business.